is not a linear journey. So when you can keep track of what's happening in your training, you can start to see patterns and the overall trends instead of getting so caught up in each individual practice. But then there's also the value of writing everything that's flowing through your mind. Like, we just have a tendency as human beings, especially the more cerebral athletes, to ruminate and fixate and go over these thoughts just constantly. And so, how do we drop out of our head and get into our body? This is one way to do it.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I am your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. And whether you're listening to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guests this episode both make a return together, co-founders of the Mindful Sports Collective, which you can find linked up here. They are both former phenomenal athletes, still pretty dang good athletes, as well as phenomenal mental performance coaches. You can learn more about both of them back in episode 6 and episode 128. Please welcome back to the Elev8 podcast, Micha Shaw and Dr. Daya Grant.
Very excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you both to share all at once. To start, I'd love to hear, I know since Dr. Daya was on the podcast a long time ago, one of the original guests, you guys have also started a little collaboration. I got some questions around that from some cool posts that I've seen you both make, but love to hear a little bit about the Mindful Sport Collective and what you all are doing.
Yeah, Daya and I actually met online during the pandemic. I think I actually responded to one of her newsletters. She has a really good newsletter. And I don't normally respond to newsletters, and this might be the only time I've ever done it, but I responded to her and she responded right away. And we started talking via email. And then I think we ended up getting on a call and talking via Zoom, and we became fast friends because we bonded over our shared experience and our passion with working with athletes. And we tried doing a book club together, which basically was just us reading books together and talking about it. And this year we kind of kept talking to each other. I mean, we've just kept in touch, and we sort of broached the idea of starting something together online for athletes that not everybody has the opportunity to work with a mental skills coach. And so we just kept thinking, like, well, what can we offer that, regardless of your financial ability, you could learn and grow and be a better athlete. And so we created Mindful Sports Collective, and it happened really fast. We just kind of had the idea and went for it. And Daya, do you want to get into a little bit about what it actually is?
Yeah, so it's an online meditation community for athletes. Meditation is the pillar of our work and our offer, but we also incorporate mental skills workshops once a month. We have a forum. We just strongly believe in the power of meditation. The science backs it up. So the more athletes we have meditating, the easier it is to teach a lot of the other mental skills as well. They just kind of layer on top of that foundation. Yeah. So yes, it is this online community. We have athletes in Europe and in the US so far, and it's really cool to come together, meditate for 15 minutes. We have multiple, minimum of 10 meditations per week. And then, as I said, we have opportunities for the athletes to ask us questions specifically about their sport and join these workshops where they can really dive deep into so many other mental skills that are all part of the mental game.
Yeah. This two-part question. My first part I wanted to ask was, I work with a lot of football environments. Sometimes more and more coaches are like, yeah, meditation, and some that are a little suspicious of it. I was just like, well, let me get in front of your players and let me see how that goes, see how helpful it is. And I distinctly remember several years ago, there's an athlete did a little session on like intro to kind of some meditation, and he had a beautiful Texas accent, and he was like, Coach TJ, I don't know if I can sit still for a minute. And I was like, that's just fine. Like, let's start with 30 seconds, if that, like, there's no rules, like, but he thought there had to be these, and that was very freeing to him. But what would you tell people that maybe have some misunderstandings of what meditation is, or what's a prerequisite? Should I even do it, or will it be useful? And then the
I
other
love
part,
how,
go ahead.
no. Oh, okay. And then we'll go back to, don't forget your question. I love how you mentioned football. I know we talked about this in that first podcast episode. I've had the honor of working with several football players, mainly kickers and QBs. And interestingly, those particular athletes came to me with some curiosity and maybe even a little bit of experience in meditation. But it was certainly nothing structured. I think they had some sense of mindfulness specifically, which is a subcategory of meditation, a type of meditation, but they didn't really know how to incorporate it into their training. So, yes, we have to meet athletes where they are. And if it's 30 seconds after practice of just staring at a wall or staring at their shoes or their locker, then that's what we start with. The key is consistency more than quantity. So, what's going to help an athlete continue to show up day after day? If it's 30 seconds and then after a week it becomes a minute and then 5 minutes, amazing. Um, there's also now so many more athletes talking about meditating, and specifically in football, you're seeing some big time college and professional athletes saying, this is what I do, I prioritize it. And I think that really helps
For sure.
athletes buy into it. But ultimately, we can sit here and talk about the science around meditation and the benefits and this and that, but it has to be experienced. So, really, we can suggest, yeah, do this 10-minute meditation that I'll record for you. I did this with an athlete, and it really wasn't until he came back and said, oh my gosh, Daya, look at my stats before I started meditating before games, and now look at my stats. And he was so excited to see the shift in the metrics that then created that motivation to keep going and keep practicing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, I think, too, is, try this and measure it and see what it does to your team or how it does for that individual. The second part of that question is, you brought up um, that layering effect, the things that meditation can kind of open up as, I think breathing, mindfulness that you touched on. But can you talk about some of those things that when we kind of can create space and time and understanding for meditation, some of those other tangents that can help us in our athletic pursuits?
Um, I love when I work with athletes, I talk about sort of like the cycle when we're meditating, we focus on our breath or, whatever our present moment anchor is, and we get distracted by our thoughts a lot of the times. And then that's totally normal. It's okay to be distracted by your thoughts, and for your mind is not going to be calm and blank while you're meditating, and that's not the intention. And then you choose to come back. You notice you're distracted, you choose to come back to your breath, and you sort of start again, focused on your breath, get distracted, refocus. And it's a cycle that you do over and over again every time you meditate. Um, and I think it's really cool when you can start to see that process play out in your sport. That what are the things that are continuously distracting you and taking away from your performance, and what is it like when when you stay focused a little bit longer. And then when you start to see it, like, oh, I've been practicing this cycle over and over again, and then you see it at practice, you see it in the competition, I think that is really exciting, because it's like it feels like you have more control. Like, okay, I know if I'm distracted by negative self-talk or my emotions got the best of me, I can acknowledge that, and I can see it, and I can choose to let it be. And I hate saying let it go, because I think that's like it feels like there's this action you need to like push it
Mm.
away.
Yeah.
which isn't very helpful, but like you can be frustrated and you can notice you're frustrated. And rather than feel adding like shame and guilt to that, you can just let it be and you can refocus your mind on what you're doing. Um,
Yeah.
and I think in the simplest form, you can apply that to every sport, like whatever sport you're in. And to see that play out in real time is really exciting and I think helps promote the practice.
I, I love that let it be versus let it go. Because I think I just it hit me in my own life. I was like, yeah, some things like, yeah, let it be. Very more of a neutral. I think where that let it go has, oh, it must be negative. You got to create distance from it, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I really like that idea. Um, well, one of the beautiful posts that I saw you guys collaborate on is something that I'm real big on. Probably another one of those great like meditation tangent things you can do, but is journaling. I wanted to talk about that. I think it's hugely a great skill and has a lot of benefits, not just for your performance in athletics, just for your well being and mindset. I had another guest on I don't know if you know Dr. Nicole Gabbana out at the University of UMass. They they do a lot of research on um, the impacts of gratitude on athletic performance. And so they've done some interesting things. And so journaling is usually involved in some of their observations and some of their things. But for those listening, maybe like, why should I journal about my game or how I'm, what would you say about starting a journal practice? And then are there any other like techniques or acronyms or things that you walk athletes through to help maybe kind of unload some of those things onto paper?
So
And
there's
it's,
so many different ways to journal. And I think it sometimes gets a misconception that it looks a certain way. But really it can just be writing down, documenting what happened in practice, mentally, physically, emotionally, and you can keep it simple. I had an athlete who was preparing for nationals, and she created an Excel sheet, and every day she would just write down in a column, this is something or three things that I did well physically, three things I did well mentally, and then one or two things that she could work on. And it just provided a place for her to keep track of her progress. And
Yeah,
we know that progress isn't linear. And sometimes we expect tomorrow's practice to be better than today's and so much better than yesterday's. And it just is not a linear journey. So when you can keep track of what's happening in your training, you can start to see patterns and the overall trends instead of getting so caught up in each individual practice. But then there's also the value of writing everything that's flowing through your mind. Like we just have a tendency as human beings, especially the more cerebral athletes, to ruminate and fixate and
yeah,
go over these thoughts just constantly. And so, how do we drop out of our head and get into our body? This is one way to do it. Just dump everything that is coming up in your mind, put it on paper. Um, and I always like to mention the science underlying this. When we
yeah,
do that, when we start to write down the thoughts, the behaviors we're seeing, anything that's coming up, we move our experience from kind of the older, um, deeper parts of the brain, the limbic system, the emotional center, to the frontal cortex. In the frontal cortex, that's where we're not hijacked so much by these thoughts because we start to create space between who we are and the thoughts that are flowing through us. And then we can use our executive functioning, which occurs in the frontal cortex, to actually say, okay, this is important. I'm going to take this into consideration. This doesn't serve me right now, so we're going to let it be. And you start to filter through some of those things instead of just getting caught up in the swirl of the emotions. So, yeah, I think it's important to give yourself permission to journal in a way that feels good for you. Again, this goes back to the consistency practice, like what feels right. And there may be some days when we have athletes who will wake up in the morning and set their timer for 5 minutes and just write whatever's coming up. Others like to have a more systematic process where they have specific prompts that they answer at the end of the day. but what's good for you is dependent on you experimenting with it.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if I know there's an app that I had used and experimented with. I think it's called, especially working with some men and our feelings, but I think it's just called yeah, I Feel. I think it's a free app. I don't know if you've heard of that. Um, but yeah, you can do some variety of journal, but it has these kind of like, how are you like high, low, just kind of a basic quadrant. You pick one where you're feeling, and then it gives you some more vocabulary to kind of be able to express and define what you're actually feeling beyond just kind of the very simple ones that some of our lexicons get shaped around. So it gives some more depth around kind of some feeling language, but then yeah, very useful. Is like, okay, you're mad. About like
Yeah.
so it helps, like, yeah, it's got a nice like thing, and then you can like also know, oh, I was at practice, or I was studying, or I was this, and then it gives you at the end of the month, it tells you oh, maybe yeah, I'm always feeling cruddy because when I'm with those friends, that's the only time I'm feeling that, and then you can kind of see trends
That's cool.
in whatever you log. But I think there's some interesting ways, like you said, you can journal if it's one sentence, right?
Yeah.
If it
Yeah, that's one of my favorites, the one line a day journal. I mean, as a
Yeah.
working mom of two, it's sometimes all I can do. And sometimes that doesn't even happen, and I've got to give myself grace on those days. But yeah, it's just one line of what you're grateful for, what stood out, what is coming up for you emotionally or not, is
yeah.
also really cool to look back on.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I think like what Daya's already mentioned, consistency a couple of times, which I think it always comes back to consistency. Because if you're not going to do it consistently, you're probably not going to see the benefits. So you might think like, oh, this isn't helpful, because, but you're not really doing it enough. And I think for athletes, like starting off, whether it's journaling, breath work, meditation, like start off so stupidly simple that it feels almost like how can like I don't even have an excuse not to do it. So I know some athletes that I work with, it's like the journaling part, they're like, oh yeah, I can write a page that like every day. I can commit to saying something in the morning and talk like an feedback after practice. And for some that might feel too overwhelming. So it's like if you just start with one sentence a day, maybe it's one positive thing you did a day, because we're really good at noticing what we did poorly. So,
Mhm.
you know, taking one win for the day and building on it, and then maybe adding another sentence when you feel more comfortable, then you can have that consistency and those like mental reps to see that it has value. I also think as far as confidence, I love like mini journaling because you're creating this like evidence of what you're doing well. So when you're feeling maybe low on confidence, you can look back over your journal and be like, oh, wait, I feel like I'm not improving, but day after day, I've been noticing these small improvements I'm making. And over time, like 3 months ago, I was working on this, and now it feels like, I've mastered it already. Maybe not
Yeah,
mastered, but you can see your progress, and that's
yeah.
really exciting. And I think it just helps build a more strong foundation of confidence for athletes.
I'm glad you brought that up because I always think that's, in my own experience, it was through gratitude journaling. I think after I'd, been consistent for a long time, and then when I was having a cruddy day, I kind of could look back and be like, oh wait, there's so much I've lost. Just even just flipping through the pages, like, oh, I filled all these pages with good stuff. Like it can't be that bad today, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I think that, yeah, that documenting has a power, whether it's that confidence that you're talking about, or um, really be able to create something that I think kids can. When I see student athletes, I think often I'd love to hear your input, but I see them often struggle with seeing progress fast enough. And they have that, they get all this kind of outside external pressures, things need to happen at XYZ, but journaling is a way to kind of give, hey, look at the process you went through, and
Mm-hmm.
look how much more confident you are now. Where there's sometimes we go through sport and then we don't have these tangible things to actually kind of go back and build off of, like you said, to get some confidence from what we have spent a few minutes a day on over the last few months.
Yeah. I also think that as like a high performing competitive person, and I know I experienced this as an athlete, but I would have a goal that I would work towards. And if I achieved it, it was like on to the next. Like, who cares? That wasn't good enough. Let's set the bar higher. Let's set the bar higher. I never really gave myself an opportunity to feel gratitude for the work that I've done for accomplishing my goal. It was always kind of like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I think with journaling, it kind of gives you that reminder and that perspective of like, look what you've done. Look at all the hard work you put in, and like hopefully you can maybe sit back and see a little bit more of your journey and the amazing things that you've accomplished.
Yeah, I like that. Anything to add, Dr. Grant?
No, I think your point is a good one that we as athletes, whether we're student athletes or way past being students and we're still athletes, it's we want those results, right? Like we want to get to that next milestone. And sometimes, a lot of times, um, it's a slow process. And the challenge, the challenge with working the mental game is that on one hand, it is a process. There are no hacks. There are no physical conditioning hacks. There are no mental conditioning hacks. But we, as humans, want things to happen quickly. Um, but even without those hacks, there are still things that you can actually see positive feedback from in a pretty short amount of time. So journaling maybe one. Meditation certainly is one. I mean, if we just stopped right now, paused this, and meditated for 5 minutes, everyone would feel some sort of shift, even if it's a tiny, tiny shift after those 5 minutes. Even if we just took a deep breath right now, we would feel something. So it's this constant reminder that you're moving in the right direction, keep putting in the work. One of the analogies or the images I really like is picturing a drop of water hitting a rock over and over and over and over. And then what happens after a while, it punctures a hole in that rock. So we don't know when that moment's going to be and those breakthroughs are going to happen and that great game or that um, huge win or whatever it is going to happen, the PR, etc. But we just keep putting in the reps, doing the work, and there's a huge amount of trust that we have to have in ourselves and in the process that we are going to quote unquote get to where we want to be, but more importantly, become the athlete and the human that we know we're capable of being in that journey. Because
Yeah,
ultimately, I think that's what every athlete is actually after, whether we can articulate that or not.
yeah,
Um, it's just shifting our perspective.
yeah. I like the word articulate because I think that in journaling, all those things I see often a lot of athletes struggle to articulate what they're going through or how they're feeling about it or what they're experiencing. And then without an outlet and articulation, it just doesn't have a place to go, except
Yeah.
for usually in a way that we don't intend um, on our fellow people that are around us. Um, I wanted to talk about bring up some breath work. What are some simple things? If coach was listening, one or two simple breath techniques that they could introduce or do daily at practice, maybe before practice to kind of relax it and shift the mindset or something. But what are some simple breathing techniques that a high school or youth coach or college coach could do with their group?
So, one very simple one is a physiological sigh. Um, it is taking a deep inhale, two inhales and one exhale. I always get this mixed up because there's benefit to both. So you can do a long inhale followed by a shorter inhale at the top and then exhale and let it all go. You can also do a deep inhale, tensing your body, and then do a double exhale, short and then long to let it go. Both of those bring in more oxygen to your body, to your brain. So it will increase your alertness, which is obviously what you want before practice, before a game, but that exhale and the focus on the exhale calms the nervous system. So it's a balancing effect that we're going after. There are other breath work practices that are better before bed or before doing an imagery session that are really going to quiet the nervous system and shift you into parasympathetic, but you don't really want to be there before a game. So
Yeah, for
that
sure.
those are a couple useful ones for that particular moment.
Yeah. Maybe we'll come back to those other moments.
I I think the I'm my fate I start with all the athletes I work with is just learning how to take deep breaths. And not, I mean, I know I heard a while ago that it's controversial to call it diaphragmatic breathing because you're always using your diaphragm. And I don't, and then people, they're like, oh, you're power breathing or deep
Belly.
belly breathing. Or I don't really, I just say like, take deep breath. Like, just if you want to get into the word, like name it, that's great. But just like start to bring awareness to your body breathing and what it's like to direct like intentionally move your breath like deep into your
Yeah.
belly to slow your breath cycles down, um, because it sets such a strong foundation for one. I think it's a nice foundation to start before you start meditation because it's a little bit more tangible than saying, oh, just watch your breath, which I think especially for competitive high achieving people that always want to do things right, you can get a little bit more in your head about, but you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I can take some deep breaths. um, and I also find that with athletes, like it doesn't take very long for them to notice a difference that like, oh, I just feel like even taking a minute to focus on my breath a little bit, I felt a little bit more at ease, or, I was in my head and I focused on my breath and I felt more present at practice or whatever it is. I just think it's such a strong foundation.
Yeah. Had a coach once was a little suspect about the breathing in football. And I was like, well, haven't you ever seen them break a huddle? They go, ready, break. like,
Yes.
like, like they've been doing it since like they've filmed football. You can see all their chests rise before they break the huddle. Like all I'm asking is we put a little thought and intention behind that moment. That's, um,
Yeah.
you, you know,
Yeah.
uh, now they also do hurry up and they don't huddle up. And it's like even more so when you do have the time to huddle up to get it in. Like, but yeah, it's interesting. You can
Yeah.
sometimes see these. It's like we're kind of doing some of it. Let's just put some intention and power behind it, instead of just the motions.
You
I
can
think,
also stack these things. So, yes, we want to teach them how to breathe, but when you're in the middle of a game and there's a lot happening and the action is fast, how do you incorporate the breath? There are those moments that we certainly can identify, but you
yeah,
can also stack that with other mental skills that you may or may not be doing, but that are certainly beneficial. So, one of the things, and this is coming straight from a quarterback, a demon quarterback, but also so many athletes do this, is finding a focal point, something in your area that's not going to change whether you're home or away, whether you're in your familiar gym or elsewhere, whatever sport you're doing. Find something, an inanimate object that's not going to move that you can look at. Just focusing your gaze on one point. This comes from yoga and this idea of drishti, but focusing your gaze helps the mind focus. And then once you're looking at that thing, take that deep breath that you've trained, that you've practiced, and then just say a cue word. Like, what do you want to focus on moving into the next moment? Is it, I am here, or
yeah,
be here now, or let's go, or I'm ready? Like, whatever is going to shift you into the mindset that you need to be in when you perform the next thing is what you say. So it's, I think sometimes that's an easier quote unquote sell, that you can incorporate breath work in a way that's also incorporating these skills that we know benefit focus and improve confidence and strengthen emotional resilience, all of these other things that are important for high performance.
um, when it comes to kind of like that, what we our self-talk and saying those intentions and kind of taking that focus, can you talk a little bit about how powerful, setting intentions, even for maybe a practice or just some of those affirmations can be, and really helping? I think I always stress when I get to talk to coaches about if you can do one thing, like teach them how to talk to themselves and teach them how to do it better than the other side's doing. Right. And
Yeah.
most teenagers they've already met the other side. They know that voice in their head. But heck, can you talk a little bit about ways you can integrate that, stack that, or even, in a team setting, I think it's a great connection opportunity sometime for teammates to do it in a team setting. But what are some powers of that?
I was like, it's starting from the awareness side of, are you even aware of how you're talking to yourself? For me, I feel like I didn't really realize how mean I was to myself until I was way out of my athletic career. And then I started to realize that the way I was still talking to myself that way, and it was so unproductive and unhelpful. So I think starting with, okay, how are you talking to yourself? Is it helpful or is it not? And then I think for some athletes, when we worked on self-talk, it seems like almost too far of a jump to go to these like really positive affirmations. And the neutral speak, I think, is really helpful because it's not good or bad. It's just rather than listening to this voice that's saying, I'm not good enough, it's not gonna, I'm gonna lose or whatever. It's just saying, pointing out around you, like, what are you actually doing? Like, I'm running right now, or I feel if I'm I think of swimming, my mind goes to swimming. It's like I hear the sound of water in my ears. I feel the pull of the water on my hands. It's like I'm kicking my leg. It sounds really simple, but giving your mind that job of something that has no, it's not, you're not judging your ability to do it. You're just simply stating what you're doing. Or even if it's like, I see, a tree in front of me or wherever you are, like calling out things around you in your environment. And just sort of moving away from that negative voice. And then maybe when you feel like you're in a good place there and it's helpful for you, then you can bring in maybe more positive affirmations or positive talk, and then you buy into it. You can buy into it a little bit more. I remember a long time ago, someone said something to me about how, um, like they didn't believe, like they were lying to them. They felt like they were lying to themselves when they were saying these positive things. And I was like, but you're listening to this voice that's lying to you. Like, why is the mean voice telling you the truth? Like,
Yeah.
you're okay with that one, but
Yeah.
so I think it really depends on the person. I think some people they can kind of
Sure.
like say those positive affirmations and it can be really grounding and a nice thing. But I think for others it can feel almost like, oh, this is another thing I'm not doing well because I don't believe it.
Yeah.
Um,
I think I think people when there is toxic positivity, right? And
mhm,
I think a lot of times, especially doing work with the Positive Coaching Alliance, it's not perfect coaching, but it, it's going to be, yeah, I kind of forgot what I was going to say, but it's definitely not easy to get that voice quiet. And I think it's so loud with kids' head. And when you can kind of just give them some certain little things to kind of get to that neutral state, like you said, it's just amazing. Because if they don't, I think in your example, what kind of struck me is how powerful the negative might be, right? Like we know it's so powerful, but even when we can't believe our own words versus our other own words,
yeah.
it has this power and this grip on us. But yeah, I think there's uh, a real power, and I think getting to that neutral and then kind of giving yourself some intention. One of the other things I wanted to bring up um, was there other environments that or things that you like to do in kind of a team setting, or things you like to do, or ways you like to introduce these tools, tactics in a team setting that you found to be ways that bonded the team or helped further relationships as well?
So one of my favorites I borrowed from my late mentor, Ken Reviza. He would do this with groups. He'd do it with his grad students, with teams and classes, and it is so impactful. He would do this 30-second drill. And he'd look around the room from person to person and just say, can you commit to focusing your full attention on what I'm saying for 30 seconds. And he'd go one after another, and everyone would nod their heads or say yes. And then he would just get into this stance. He's like sumo squat. And he'd say, all right, on the count of three, you're just going to focus right here on me. One, two, three, lock in. And he would just for 30 seconds, and I do this in my own voice and way, just say, all you're doing right now is hearing the words coming out of my voice. You're looking at my eyes, you're maybe looking at my mouth moving, and you're fully invested in this moment. Feel how it feels. And then there's a pause, and you just feel that presence.
Yeah.
And after the 30 seconds, it's okay, break, look around, let your mind wander. And then we ask the athletes or the group how that felt. And everyone responds with, whoa, like that was powerful. That was 30 seconds, but 30 seconds of everyone on my team being completely present.
Yeah.
Totally different experience
Yeah.
than when everyone's thinking about what they're having for dinner and what yesterday was like and all of that. There's an energy shift. And so the more you can practice that as a group and really get them to feel that, then the easier it is for each individual athlete to train that in their own on their own time. Um, and then you start to build that strength as a team and that recognition of, okay, we can do some amazing things if we're all on the same page and we're all where our feet are and not
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a powerful feeling. There it kind of there's a game we go ahead. We're gonna say something.
Oh no, no, nothing, nothing. I'm good.
Um, Sometimes I played a game. I play a game. We call it usually brain booty ball. So like we have like kids, like their brain, put their hands on their brain, their booty, or there's a football in between them and a partner. And so it's kind of like, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And a little Simon Says, but you give them a command. And then when you say ball, someone gets it first and they win. And then they eliminate their teammates. All right. So we would do that. And then you get to like the final four, and then they're all circle around and cheering, making it harder to hear. And then that's when I would call like just like a fake timeout, stop. And they're just like, what are you doing? Like they all give me this look like, why are you stopping it right now? And but that's when it's like, do you feel how unified and locked in you guys are on this right now? And it's like, I had a coach who's like, dude, I don't know how I could replicate that with a football drill. I'm like, I don't know. Like, but it's just like that. I think when
Yeah,
it's kind of, we talked earlier, it's like when you can feel it, we can really kind of, learn the power of it. Um,
I
I-
love that. That's a great activity to do.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think you can kind of do it in different ways, but it's like everyone kind of builds up, that energy builds, the adrenaline builds, the competition builds, and they're still kind of focused on what's going on, and so, yeah, I think there's ways you can get them to experience those things are one, fun and unifying. Um, I think we could geek out all day long talking about this stuff. I think we could probably go a couple more episodes. I know I could talk to you both about this stuff forever. But in closing, I'd love to hear for maybe those coaches, if you haven't been convinced from these two in this episode already. But what would be your reasoning to share with a coach that's suspect of involving mental skills, meditation, or mindfulness, or creating some space for that in practice? What would be your wisdom and tip for them?
I need a moment to think about this one. Do you have something,
Yeah,
Daya?
that's fair.
I mean, we always say train your mind like you train your body. And I think a lot of coaches are already incorporating mental strength conditioning, whether they recognize it or not. But sometimes it's easier to defer to someone who's not attached to the team, who can really come in objectively and say, okay, this is the stuff that we know works based on our experience, the science, the stories, all of that. And really, all we're doing is we know that the mind plays a huge part in any type of performance. I mean, if you are not like you can get really far on physical skill alone, but at a certain point, you're not going to get to that next level. When we look at Olympians, when we look at the goats in this world, when we look at the best of the best, the thing that differentiates them from the ones who almost made it but didn't is the mental game. It's the space between their ears. It's their ability to regulate their emotions, to use their self-talk productively, to their ability to focus and bounce forward after setbacks. Like all of these things are critical. So we have the knowledge and the opportunity now to teach young student athletes all of these skills, and it's going to benefit them not just in their sport, but way past beyond that in everything they do in their lives forever. So we can't just take this stuff lightly. I mean, this is really impactful, and it's an honor that we have the privilege to teach these skills to the next generations.
Yeah. Well, the generations are lucky to have you. And then
Yeah.
I'll throw it to Micha.
Uh, I was just going to add on to that. I think I thought about that a lot is that, and what Daya mentioned is that every day you're training your mind, whether you know it or not. So being able to bring a little awareness to, okay, well, when I show up to a competition, like, how do I want to feel? Am I putting in the work to show up the way that how I can perform at my best? And I think when it comes to coaches, I think more often than not, they have the best of intentions and they're putting so much effort into helping their athletes. And he can't be all the things for every single person on your team. And so having a little bit of support on the with someone coming in and helping with the mental side, I think can be invaluable. When I was in grad school, I had the opportunity to work with the track team, and it was really interesting for me to. And the track team was huge, and there was I'm going to butcher it now. Maybe there's like 4 or 5 groups with different coaches
Yeah.
specific for that group. And coming in from the sports psych, every coach responded to us differently. And it was really interesting to see then how the athletes responded to us coming in. So some coaches, one of the coaches, um, didn't give us any opportunity to talk to the athletes. But when he had an athlete that was struggling, he would just come over and he'd be like, go talk to them. They're freaking out. And I was like, I don't know. There's nothing I can do. Like, they don't know me. They don't trust me. There's nothing I can do. Like, this is really uncomfortable. And he would stand behind me and be like, go, like, you need to go talk to them. They need help. And I was like, this is like, we're past the point. Like, right before you get up to compete, this is not the time to learn a mental skill. Like, you need to do the work before. So you have the tools to then use it right before you compete. And another coach gave us 5 minutes before practice, and he was like, okay, you have 5 minutes. And so like at first we were like, okay, what can we do in five, you literally have 5 minutes to teach a mental skill and hope that they practice. And he would say, sports psych's here, and he would walk away and he would go look at his phone. So we'd have 5 minutes to talk to the athletes. They were totally checked out. Some of them would be involved, but it was also hard. So it's like, well, we have 5 minutes. It's not a lot of time for them to get to know us, to trust us with what we're telling them. And then he wasn't interested. So it was like, why are they going to buy in? And an athlete, I experienced that too. Like, why am I going to buy into what this person's saying if my coach isn't going to buy into it? And then one of the other coaches was like, come on over. I taught the athletes meditation once a week. He would take part in some of the sessions, but in like a very open way. So it wasn't like uncomfortable. He wasn't demanding athletes to be vulnerable or to share. It was very collaborative. And it felt, I mean, for me, it was really exciting because I was like, anytime a coach is excited about mindfulness or mental skills, anything, I mean, that's what I'm really excited to talk about. But I also noticed that it's not that everybody in his group bought into it and was super excited about it, but they were at least open. And I think then you have the opportunity to plant this seed for them that they might come back to later. So that was a kind of a long way to answer your question.
No, it's a great example because I think it was a couple of years ago I worked with a college football team, and the coach was in his last year or two coaching in his twilight, and during 2 days I brought him in, and I think we did a little bit of meditation, and it was funny, that was like the coach's most favorite part. And so I was like, well, aren't the coaches stressed out too? Like, let's just do it together,
Yeah.
get on the same level. It's like, why are we going to deregulate over here while y'all continue to drink coffee and go crazy over there? Like,
Yeah.
so, but I think I think we can do these things with our athletes, especially when you're blessed with the time and opportunities to do those with your teams and things. I think it's a great way for uh, ways to connect, and yeah, like you said, those collective feelings that you get, whether you're doing breath work, meditating, or playing a silly game, I think those collective experiences when you have that unified feeling are powerful. So I love that example. I think it's huge when coaches aren't truly, you know, believing in it. It's hard for an athlete to understand that. Because I had a coach come up to me right before kickoff a game. He was like, "Can you go make sure he's okay?" I'm like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
Like he looks scary to me. Like I like he looks good. He's a linebacker, looks ready to go. Like he's like, no, but he's like, is he good? I'm like if he's not, what are we gonna do? We're gonna kick the
Yeah.
ball off here, and I think he's gonna give us a great effort. Let's just get let's let it rip. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Air on some confidence and encouragement. I don't know at that point. Well, thank you too much. Thank you both for joining us and sharing so much wisdom again. I'll link up the Mindful Sport Collective. I'll link up the former podcast, but yeah, share with the people what's the best way if people listening want to get in on the 10 meditation sessions. How can they find you? How can they get involved? How can they do so?
Well, we both are on Instagram. I'm at Micha Shaw. We also have my at Mindful Sports Collective. Daya has her Instagram, which you can share. You can check out our website, mindfulsportscollective.com. So you can reach out to us via Instagram or check out our website. Email us if you have any questions. We're always very excited to connect and to talk with athletes. And also, I think sometimes the barriers, people think maybe you have to be a certain level of athlete to join, and there's no test on your athletic ability. If you are into mindfulness meditation, you like to watch sports and you want to meditate with us, like please join us. There's no, you can be a complete beginner and everybody's welcome.
Well, thank you
Yeah,
so
I'll just
much.
add,
Yeah.
I'll add that we're also starting to offer the workshops even if you're not a member. So if you're curious about some of these mental skills and that's kind of where you are and you're not yet at the point where you want to practice once, twice, 5 times a week, then go to our website, check out our Instagram, and just kind of keep an eye on those workshops that are going to be rolling out as well. Because those are a really, really good way to dive deeper into some of these practices. And then, yeah, Dr. Daya Grant is my Instagram and diagrant.com is my website. And we thrive off of this work and meeting athletes where they are. So let's connect and see how we can support you.